So today we'll be taking a look at System Center Operation Manager 1801, and more specifically the new HTML5, fully HTML5 web console available, and some of the new dashboard capabilities that have been introduced in this release. So if you've been using SCOm for a while, you know that there's been various different iterations of the SCOm web console, and then there's been various different types of dashboard capabilities that's been introduced. So originally SCOm had what I like to call just standard dashboards. So those you kind of had to pick like a specific grid, wasn't very flexible, so you had to pick up how you want it to be structured up front, how many grid lines and things that you wanted, and then you would cherry pick and put various different widgets into the various different spaces. So that worked okay. It provides some flexibility to give you different metrics and present it in various different ways. So it worked okay. Not the most performant. Sometimes it can be a little sluggish to load some of those things, but I digress. Another thing that was introduced, so this kind of came from the SQL team. I'm assuming whoever the SQL developers that make Status Manager packs, they had what we call a SQL Data Center dashboard. So that provided drill down capabilities, so you can start at a high level, look at various different components of the dashboard, and then you can drill down into deeper and deeper layers for that. And so one of the things that wasn't always obvious with that is that even though it's SQL Data Center in the name, you can actually use that dashboard capabilities for any object within SCOm and get those same drill down capabilities and align it up with the appropriate metrics that you want to display. So those work pretty good. They were a lot prettier. It has like different changing color graphs and graphics and red, yellow, and green and things like that. So kind of combine all that data together. Pain point with that is typically would be that sometimes it would be pretty slow to load, or sometimes it wouldn't load at all for some environments. So it seemed like it has some issues from time to time with that, whether you're looking at it in the SCOm console itself, or if you're trying to look at it on the web console available in, say, like SCOm 2012 R2 or SCOm 2016. So fast forward, now we're on SCOm 1801 and the new HTML5 dashboard. They've actually have a brand new way to display dashboard information. So those standard dashboards that I mentioned, those are still visible and viewable in the new dashboard. But I imagine most people, once they start using the new dashboard experience, they're probably gonna definitely use the new dashboards as opposed to old. So there are some caveats, that's with anything. Main thing is that those new dashboards are not visible in the main SCOm console, so that can be an issue for some people if they spend most of their time in the main regular fat client SCOm console. But they are visible and usable on the new web console, and they're a lot more flexible, so you don't have to be locked into a fixed grid type of design up front, and then like if you decide you don't like that design at some point, you have to actually start all the way over in the model within the console. With this, it's flexible. You can move things, drag and drop things around, and a lot better capabilities as far as that, and a lot more performant than any of the previous iterations of the dashboards that I've used. And on top of that, I believe it may be a little bit faster than the real fat console as well, as far as displaying some of the data and things like that. It seems I don't know if the queries are better optimized or what exactly is going on underneath the covers, but it definitely, from my experience, since I've been playing around with it, it seems to be a lot more responsive. It seems to load more consistently, with minimum delays as far as displaying the data. So let's go ahead and get into it. So here we are. We're on the SCOm HTML5 web console. So this is in the 1801 installation of Operation Manager. And here I'm just sitting here on a login screen. So when you log in, you have a few options. You can log in with Windows Authentication, which will try to log in with your currently logged in credentials. Or you can hit use alternate credentials and log in there. Since I'm logged in with an account that has permissions, I'm going to go ahead and click use Windows Authentication. And by the way, right now I'm using Google Chrome, but you also could be using Edge or another modern browser. Any modern browser should work just fine. So here we're on the entry page. So some of this looks pretty familiar, but as far as like the color scheme and some of the graphics may look a little bit updated compared to what you're currently used to. So up here at the top, that is kind of a link, System Center Operation Manager. That'll just take you back to the home page. Have a little link here where you can send feedback, to provide feedback to the product group that's maintaining this particular web console. And let's go ahead and close out of that. And then up here just shows what username you're logged in as. So right now I'm logged in as administrator account. And then on the far right, you have the sign out button there. So let's go ahead and just browse and explore what we're seeing here. So when you're normally in the FAT console that you install on your system, you kind of see something very similar to this when you initially log into it. So this looks very similar. And neat thing about this new console, there's no Silverlight dependencies, so you don't have to worry about any of that. It's fully HTML5 across the board. So here I can kind of see the status of my various different computers, what's going on there. Then I can see what the status of my various different distributed applications that I may have. So one noted difference here is that when you're in the FAT console, these numbers I believe are clickable. In this console, they are not. But you do have a Go to Windows Computer button, and you have a Go to Distributed Application button. So I'm just going to go ahead and click the Go to Windows Computers button, and that'll jump me over into Windows Computer view. So you may have noticed that loaded pretty quick. So there's not a whole lot of delay as far as that loading and things like that. So I have a lot of systems right now. There's only 16 in this particular environment. A lot of them are offline, so you're seeing a lot of gray. So similarly, like you see in the full FAT console, you kind of get the status. So this looks very familiar to what you're familiar with when you use the full console. So you can still like click on the individual computers. You'll get your status, task, and things like that. Various different computer tasks will get exposed. So you can leverage that. You can right click on this. You get your just kind of the same experience you get when you're in the full console. So alert, performance view, diagram view, health explorer. I can dive into any of those as mentioned the task, or I can go and get additional instance property information, or I can go and launch maintenance mode as well. So you can do most of the basic tasks that you can do in the full console. You can actually now also do them here, and again without any Silverlight dependencies. So as I click on that, you see down at the bottom, state view details. That kind of just pretty much the exact same experience you get when you're on the FAT console, or even the previous version of the web console. These is kind of similar experience that you receive there. So over here on the left hand side, so now this is where things are new. So you see this button, little plus green button there, and then you have a word that says new dashboard. So these new dashboards that you can create here, as I mentioned, these are only available in this new web console experience. The new dashboards you create using this button are not available in the full console. This is the kind of the icon that gets created when you create a new dashboard. So I've gone through and already created various different examples of these dashboards that we'll dive into in a minute here. So one of the things I had mentioned earlier as well is that existing standard dashboards are available and viewable in this console, but those SQL Data Center dashboards that I mentioned, those don't appear to be visible in this particular web console. So the icon for them don't even show up. So as you see here, I think I have like a SQL summary view or something that showed up when I'm in the full console, but I don't see it when I log in here. So I don't know if that's something with my permissions. I don't think it is, as I'm using the exact same account. But none of those views are visible here. So that may be something that they intentionally excluded, because maybe I'm not really sure what the idea behind that. But yeah, those particular dashboards are not visible here. But the SQL Data Center dashboards are not visible, but the standard regular dashboards, those are still there, still available. So like this built-in dashboard for disk health, that's still visible. You can see all the information about going on there. So all of that works the same as in the FAT console or in the previous version of the SCOm web console. So let's go into one of these new dashboard experience. So let's take a look at just what we have here. So this is one. I'm getting weird error. Some of these, not sure what's going on there. Wasn't getting that before, so that's something guess that just happened in the last little bit. Not sure what that means. So we'll just ignore that for now, whatever those errors mean. But the idea here is that we see we have various different, we can see various different servers here. So what I've done, I've added various different widgets to this dashboard. So I've added in a view where I can kind of quickly see the status of my domain controllers, quickly see the status of DNS server role that may be also running on those domain controllers, or if they're standalone domain controllers. Because so domain controllers and the DNS, those are kind of two components that I consider important from an AD perspective. So those are two things I decided to put on the dashboard. So here, not sure why this view for the data drive free space and log drive free space is not showing currently, but the idea here is that this would have graphed out the current free drive space on those two across all of the domain controllers in the environment. Is what this was intended to do. It previously was working. Not quite sure what happened in the last couple minutes since I started recording this that caused it to stop, but let's continue on. So other things I have here, I kind of graphed over. So okay, over the last 24 hours, how many Kerberos authentication per second on average am I performing? How many NTLM am I performing? KDC AS requests, TGS requests. If here, this was the same thing for response time. That appears to be having the same problem as those two. Not really not really sure what's going on there. I have to look into that a little bit later. But the thing is as you look at each one of these, you actually can scroll down in here. So I could have made these bigger, but I kind of wanted to just see the graph when I look at it at a glance, as opposed to seeing all the name of the objects. So the neat thing here is that you can search within here. So say if I wanted to just see, say DC1, I can type DC1, hit enter, and then that'll filter the list down here at the bottom to just show DC1. And so here there's various different columns that I could display. So in my case, I just wanted to show the last value, so the last sample value for Kerberos authentication, so, the path and the target. So in this case, I probably didn't need target or path because they appear to have the same name essentially. So I probably could have got rid of one of those and got more screen real estate back. So we're seeing here at the graph at the top, you're seeing like multiple values, right? So only 2 of my DCs are online right now, so we're only seeing 2 graphs. So my third DC is offline, and so it's, I don't have any recent data coming from that one. But so what I can do, I can click this box here to uncheck all of the data that's selected. So you see my graph went blank, and then since I did the search, I can just go and click DC1. And then I just have the data for DC1 that'll be displayed on the graph. So you see that happened pretty quick. There was not really much of a delay. And I'm doing that all interactively. I'm not going resaving and modifying things like you have to do in the standard dashboards to get this kind of experience. It's just kind of natively here, and it works pretty well. So that same thing I did for this Kerberos authentication, I could go through and do that same thing for any of these other graphs that I have here. So I can see that data right at a glance. A little bit further down, I have things for LDAP searches per second. So the same concept. I'm saying, hey, okay, across those DCs, what are those most recent LDAP searches, performance metrics for those systems? Doing the same thing for the LSAS process. How much processor is it using? And then I have this what we call like a tile widget, which is actually a grouping. So I have a group of AD domain controllers, and that actually doesn't have any monitors targeted toward that group. So that's why we're just seeing this shows up as a gray box, but that was a group that had monitors targeted toward it. This entire box would turn red, green, yellow based on the status. And then now here we have the 4 major roll-ups that are, or aggregate roll-ups that are available on every object in SCOm. So availability, performance, configuration, and security. Those would also turn red, green, yellow as those various different monitors target toward the roll-up change state. And then the number of alerts across all of those objects within this group, I would get a number of how many active alerts are currently on that. So that's kind of how that will work. So like in all of this, I picked every single section and quadrant, I sized it and things like that. So the other thing that I mentioned, like these dashboards are a lot more flexible than what's available in the FAT console with those standard dashboards, because you're kind of locked into whatever design you pick up front unless you go back and rebuild it. So with these, you can just simply click the edit dashboard button, and then I can move these things anywhere I want. I can move them anywhere around on the screen, you see, and everything just kind of realign around it as I move things around. I can make it smaller, bigger, stretch it out, whatever I want to do with it. So I have a lot of flexibility with that. And then like I said, I can move these anywhere on the screen, on the grid that I want them to go. So in case of this, I don't want to actually change that. I kind of like the layout I have, so I'm just going to do undo changes. And so on each one of these widgets, as you may see, is that there's a refresh button. So by default, these will refresh, I believe, every 5 minutes. You can configure that, but I can go ahead and click these 3 dots here. And then you have a few options. So I could export the data that's coming off of this grid to Excel. I could personalize it. So when these are initially created, the columns and things that are selected, that's going to be inherited by everyone else that logs into the console. But if you can go to personalize, and then you can go and change those things just for your particular use case, or for your particular account that you're using. So you can kind of go and it'll expose all the values that are available, and you can go and select the ones that you want. I'm not going to change anything there, but let's go back into there, and then let's go into the edit button. Go into the edit button. So you can see here, when I originally created this, I targeted toward a group named AD Domain Controller Group, Microsoft Windows Server 2016. And then what that does, once you select your group, every metric that's available on the objects within those groups will be exposed here in this list. So if you know what you're looking for, so say I'm looking for, I don't know, something with the word latency in it, right? I could just type latency, and then every monitor or rule or whatever it is that has that, any metric that has that word in it will appear in the list, and then I can add that into my graph. So you can have multiple objects on the same graph. So in my case, on all the ones I have, I'm focusing on one metric per graph. But if there's some type of correlation between multiple metrics, you could plot them against each other in the same graph to get some additional insights. So other things you can do here, there's criteria. So I can say what is the time range of data that I want to look at when the graph is driven out. So do I want to look at the last 5 minutes, last 10 minutes, last 24 hours, last days, week, months, years? You can go back as much as you want. So in my case, I'm using the last 24 hours. So I'm looking at roughly, okay, what does this look like over the past day? What is the average over those past couple hours throughout the day? So that's what we see on the graph. Then you go to display. There where you select what columns do you want to display. So mine, I'm just doing last value, path, and target. But there's a few different options, and it'll vary depending on what you're looking at. You do have this option to visualize objects by performance. So instead of driven in graph, it'll just kind of show the server name or the object name that you're looking at, and then also it'll just have like the number associated with that. So you have a couple options there. And then completion. That's just where you just simply type in the name or the kind of the header that you want to appear over there. You can put in the description if you want, and then you can select your refresh interval. So on the refresh interval, so minimum allowed value is 1, maximum is 480. So you have some flexibility there as far as how often you want the widget data to refresh. So I'm not going to change any of that, but that gives you a good idea of, or at least for these like graph-like metrics of the options you have. So let's take a look at this widget here. So this is what we call a tile widget, as I previously mentioned, but the concept is very similar. So I targeted that same computer group that I did in another. So this can be your own group that you created, or it can be a group that's built into the product. You can kind of do it either way. You can target any type of object that's available. But you see in this one, there's not any options available. It's pretty much you select your group, you give it a name, and then you're done. And then it uses that information to go and populate the graphics, the number of alerts, and then the color scheme would change based on the overall health of those objects. So again, as I mentioned, that group that I'm using does not have any monitors targeted toward it. So it effectively has no health. So that's why we don't have a color on top of here. So looking over here on the right, let's take a look at this widget. So this here is what we call a state widget. So if we go ahead and edit. So here, kind of the same concept. So you can do groups or class. So in this case, I chose to do a specific class. So I chose Active Directory Domain Controller Computer Role. So what that'll effectively do, any object within my environment that is hosting the Active Directory Domain Controller Computer Role would appear in the list. So the key factor here is that I'm not targeting the entire computer. I'm only targeting the domain controller role. So for example, when I'm looking at the dashboard here, say if the system had low disk space, for example, my domain controller object wouldn't show it red because of that. The Windows computer object would, but that's not what I'm representing or displaying in the graph. So that's a distinction that I made intentionally when I created this particular dashboard. And you may want to do something similar like that too, to kind of distinguish between the application that's running on top of the server and then maybe other aspects of the server that may not necessarily affect the application itself, but it may affect the overall computer. So you make a distinction between the two as you're picking the various different options you want to display on your dashboard. So criteria, here you can select various different health states. So I just had it select all. So even if something is not monitored or in a gray state, it'll still show up in my graph. You could say if you want to do the opposite, maybe you wanted to only have it call out things that are unhealthy. So you could just say, hey, just show me the critical or warning states. And anything else, it won't appear in the list. If you have like a large list of systems, that may be the better way to go, because if you have like hundreds of these domain controllers, it may be a little bit difficult to scroll through everything to see the status of everything. And then you can distinguish if you want to display objects in maintenance mode or not. And then display, again, it's very similar to what I've already shown you. Just kind of go through and select the columns associated with whatever object you're displaying. You can select any of those related columns that are available on that object and have those display in your graph or display there. And then completion is exactly the same. You put your name, the name of what you want to put, and then your refresh interval and the description is optional if you want to put that. So that is that. And let's see. Yeah, so that's all the views I have here. So let's click Add Widget so you can kind of see what widgets are available. So we kind of talked about most of them up to now. So we looked at a state widget. All of those graphs we looked at, all of those are performance widget. We also looked at a tile widget. So that was that group that didn't have that had the alert message on it. That was a tile widget. You also have a topology widget. So I don't really have a good example of that one, but what that one is that pretty much you can provide a picture to the console, and, and then you can layer state from various different objects within SCOm on top of that picture. So say for example, you could take a picture of your real live data center, and then you can drag and drop the actual state of that server on top of it, and then you'll kind of see that visually of what's going on. So to turn red, green, yellow as it goes through various different states within the environment. Then you have a custom widget. So this one I haven't played with too much to fully understand. There is a good blog article that I may be able to point to where I believe some of the product group people, they kind of shown how you can kind of leverage this. But essentially you can provide HTML code that'll be rendered and displayed back on the page. So that's something you can do if you need to do that. So this is a good way if you want to pull in information from another system and have it display in context on your dashboard. This is a good way how you can do that. But I'm not doing that here. So other things you can do with these dashboards, they have a view and full screen option. So say if this is up in some type of NOC or network operation center or some type of maybe even just by your desk, you can have these various different metrics and things visible on the screen, and just kind of it'll refresh like every 5 minutes or whatever you configured it for, so you can throughout the day you just kind of see what's going on with the various different components. So this can be I grouped it by AD dashboard. So it's, in this case it's a I'm focusing on a particular technology, but it could be an application. You can mix technologies. You can kind of do whatever you want. You have a lot of flexibility, and I just chose to like focus on one particular type of system. But you, like I said, you could group SQL servers and AD and DNS and IS and SCCM or whatever you're monitoring within SCOm. You could have put this on the graph or metrics about that there. So I just hit escape there to get out of the full screen dashboard. So that's just kind of give you a good idea. So let's take a look at this IIS dashboard. This is kind of another example of something that I did. So in this case, I'm targeting the specific IIS server component, not the whole server. You can target the whole server, is that what you want? But in my case, I want it to be more specific, and I want to target the actual application that I'm caring about. So I don't want these to be, I don't want to see red on this particular dashboard because again, let's say if I have low disk space, I don't want that to say my IS component is unhealthy. That's not what I'm trying to represent. I want to focus on the IS server application itself. So here I'm seeing, I can see the state of my few IS servers. I chose to put the version on there. And then I'm seeing some metrics: bytes sent, received, how many connections they currently have, how many connection attempts has been happening. And then I also chose to put on my application pools, my IS app pools in a view as well. Kind of have that in context in the same view, so I kind of see what's going on there. And again, you could have chose different metrics to represent and display. So one thing I didn't show when we were looking at the AD dashboard is that what you can do here is that these dashboards do have some drill down capabilities. So you see here on the right, I chose specific counters that I wanted to see. But say if I were to click on one of these servers over here on the left, so let's say if I pick this one here, if I click on that, this dashboard generate automatically. So I didn't have to go and configure this or do anything. This is just native to these dashboards. So I can kind of drill down and see, once I click on it, I can see, okay, that particular IIS web server or IIS component has this web server that is also healthy. I can see some various different information about that. I click on IIS web servers, I see some information about that. And then if I scroll down, if there is any issues or alerts going on with them, that will be automatically displayed there. And if I keep scrolling down, if there's any unhealthy monitors on there, those would also be displayed here. And if I keep going down more still, any performance metrics that's targeted toward that object that I picked at the top level, the most recent values from those that's been collected from those performance counters would be displayed and visible here. So all that just kind of happens automatically for you. You don't have to actually configure anything for that to happen. It just happens automatically. So other things here is that, let me scroll on back up to the top. So right now I have IIS web server selected. So over here you have tasks. So any tasks that are associated with that object that I currently have selected, those will be available. If I click this little icon here, I can see all those tasks. I can execute those and stop and start things directly from the console. Same for this object. I click on that, I see some different tasks that gets exposed there. Other thing here, if I click on this performance button here, again, so it automatically builds out pretty much a view for all of the performance metrics associated with that object, and I can go and look at those metrics here. So I chose to, on that top level screen, I cherry pick some of the metrics that I wanted to see on that main top screen, but any metric that's on that system, it will be available once I click on that particular object. So that's a really neat feature that these dashboards have. So in particular, the state view, that's a feature of the state widget that I added in there. All right. So that's kind of that. So let's take a look at the server dashboard. It's more of the same kind of concept. I just kind of have it organized a little bit different metrics that I picked. So in this case, that tile widget that I talked about earlier, in this case, this one does have like a monitor associated with it. So you see it's turned red. So I'm looking at overall health of all of my Windows servers that's in the group. Overall, it has a health state of critical. Most of that's probably coming from DC1 and like Manage 1 are also, they're both of those two servers are in critical, so they're driving the overall health of this overall group to critical. And collectively, there are 12 alerts on them, and so we're kind of seeing that status across the board. Over here on the right, I have an alert widget. So the alert widget is kind of neat as well. It has some additional capabilities kind of built in. It's kind of busy here, so you can pick what columns you want to be displayed. I probably have a few more columns than I need here, so I probably going to turn off source. I may not want to display that in this context. But what you can do here, so you can do things like close an alert. So it's a little bit different than how you would do it in the console. So when you're in full console, you kind of can click and then highlight multiple alerts in one go. So that doesn't work here in the console. What you instead have to do, you have to like click these check boxes next to the alerts that you want to do some operation on. Then you have to click these little 3 dots here, and then you can set a resolution state. So I can say set resolution state, and then go ahead and change that or close it or whatever I want to do with those particular alerts. And then I can also put in a comment on why I'm doing it. So when that alert closes, that comment would be associated with it within SCOm. But in my case, I don't want to do any of that. You also have this checkbox at the top, so that can mask select everything in the list or mask unselect everything in the list. So that makes it a little bit easier. So if you want to mask close some of these alerts, that'll be a good way how you can do it. So yeah, so that's kind of this widget. So other thing about this widget is that once you can click this little arrow here, and that'll go ahead and grab the context of the description message of that particular alert of what's going on with it. Why is it in an error condition? Or I can click on it. If I click on it, it takes me into one of those automatically built dashboard drill downs. So in this case, I see all the various different details about what's going on with the object. I can see, okay, this description of the monitor, what's going on, is not responding to pings. Or, well, in this case, it is responding to pings, but I don't have enough DNS servers is pretty much what it's complaining about. I can see like the product knowledge information associated with that monitor rule. If there's company knowledge configured for that, that will be visible as well. Then I can see the history of that as well. So pretty much when it's kind of the similar experience of what if you were to right click on the monitor within SCOm and go and look at the properties. It's each one of those tabs. It's one of these sections here. So other thing that is new here is that to edit company knowledge in the full console, it requires like an old version of Office and a weird plugin that you probably don't have. So most people don't use that capability. So now here they've made it easier. So it's pretty much right there in line. You can leverage it and modify it and have some nice formatting and things to it right here in the console. So test. Go to wiki and do some stuff. So I can add some extra formatting to it, underline it. I could add some web links and other stuff into here, images, quotes. So you have some nice little formatting capabilities. I can insert tables, etc., etc. Insert some code if I needed to. So if I click here, insert my code. So I can type insert my code, highlight that. Mouse doesn't want to cooperate, so I can say it's code. Alright, and then I need to save it somewhere, so I'm just going to save this into my dashboard manager pack. Just go ahead and say save. So here it's keeping that whole company knowledge experience in line, right? Making it a lot easier than it is in the full console, which, like I said, most people don't use the company knowledge because it's convoluted to use. You need that extra plugin. You got to have an older version of Office, and then there's some other things that you may need to do to actually get it to work properly. But now it just works natively. You don't have to worry about it. It just works and it creates it. All right. So let's go ahead and close. Oh, one other thing here is that, so that same experience like when we're looking at the other view. So you click the this icon here, you can go and run your various different tasks associated with that system if you need to. So go ahead and exit out of that. And finally, we'll just take a look at the SQL dashboard that I created. Very similar to the others. So here I've got the state view, looking at the overall state of my SQL database engines. This could be a reporting server, NatLS services. It could have been anything that I wanted. I just specifically wanted to know about my database engines. And then on the right, I'm exposing any alerts that's associated with those systems. I kind of quickly see that in line. So one different thing I'm doing here, I'm showing the isMonitor alert. So if one of these alerts came from a monitor, it would say true. And then I would know that, hey, I may not want to mask close that because that can have some unexpected consequences, for example. So I wouldn't be told if that still is bad if I were to say a mass close a monitor based alert and it's still unhealthy. I wouldn't be notified again with a new alert to tell me that it's still bad. So this column can be useful to show you that. And then I had also added ticket ID in this case. So this environment currently is not integrated with a ticketing system, but say if it was, as far as doing generating some type of ticket ID on a ticketing system, I could pull that back into SCOm and have that be visible here. All right, and then I'm pulling some various different metrics about these database engines up here, just kind of putting those in line. And again, it's the same experience that I showed earlier. You kind of see I can go and filter by keyword and search the various different systems available. And other neat thing that I didn't talk about really much up to now, but the results are paginated, for example. So if this was going to be multiple pages, these would light up. I can like scroll forward and back, and I also can specify how many results I want per page, up to 100. So that makes it a lot easier to search things and find things and just display the things that you want, especially if you have like hundreds or dozens of objects. And it's kind of easy in mine since I only have the 3 in this particular lab, but if you have a lot more objects, that pagination as well as the search makes it a lot easier. So I have some other metrics here. So looking at CPU utilization across those SQL instances, how many transactions per second they're doing. I targeted percent free space for the C drive specifically, so I could have did all of the drives. In this case, I only want to see the C, but I could have grouped them all in this one graph for every drive letter, or I could have a different section for each drive letter. You can just kind of, you have a lot of flexibility. You can do it any way you want. I just put the C drive on this one, and I did average disk latency as well. For the C drive as well on those systems. So yeah, something's going on in that green one there. Like latency is getting a little out of hand. Pretty high spike there. Who was that? Who's making that big spike there? Yeah, so so sometimes I have ran into this where the color is very similar on some of these. Most of the time it does a good job of differentiating the colors. You don't pick the colors, it just kind of picks them at random for you. But sometimes, like in this case, it's 2 very close shades of green, so they look very similar. So I can see SCOm SAC1. Let's see, maybe it's this one. That has the, yeah, so it's that one that had the really high spikes. The SCOm SAC1. That server has some latency issues going on with its C drive, but other thing, so SQL average wait time, kind of plotting that there, so I kind of see what's going on there. So the wait time again on some of these were kind of getting a little bit high, drop back down, like they're starting to trend a little bit further back up as the day go on. But yeah, so processor, memory percent utilization, you can kind of pick any counter you want, graph them, and the graph, these looks pretty good, and they're pretty easy, pretty straightforward to move around. They're not static. So if you, like I said, like in the older standard dashboards, in the console, you're kind of locked into those decisions that you make the first time, and then if you kind of want to significantly change the layout, you can't really do it. You pretty much have to start over, unfortunately. Here and in these new modern HTML5 dashboards, you have this full flexibility to move these things around, to add the various different metrics in there, and they load pretty fast, and they look good. So hopefully this has been useful, and as you start using SCOm 1801, these will be a brand new, nice new feature to have to build dashboards, because as I know, this kind of been a pain point for quite some time with SCOm, where normally you have to go to like a third-party vendor that had an add-on for SCOm in order to get something similar or get a much better experience with SCOm. So this some of the third-party vendors still have more capabilities than what's available natively now, but this is in my opinion, a drastically improved experience compared to what's been available in the past. So hopefully this information has been useful, and I will see you in the next one.